So I'm going to replace the carpet with hardwoods in a child's bedroom. And to do that, the first step is going to be remove the carpet. There's just these tack strips along the sides there. And the carpet is not actually doubled over the tack strip. It's just stuck right on top of it. Tack strip's like a wood ruler with a bunch of nails coming up out of it. So they stuck it on top, and then they took and pushed the extra edge, they cut it a little bit long, up under the baseboard. So to get started, I mean, there's probably better methods, but I'm just going to take and put a little cut with a razor here into the carpet, right a little bit outside the tack strip. It cuts real easy. And I'm going to take a little pry bar, get it up under there, I'll just pull it away. And there's the tack strip and the carpet pad. So these little nails are very sharp. And we'll remove those next by just kind of prying them up. Might need a hammer. But if you, there's a nail about every 5 inches. It's going down into the subfloor, going the opposite direction. And the other ones are coming up with little spikes to catch the carpet. They stretched it and they just stuck it straight up under there. They didn't double it over or roll it over or anything. So to get these, they don't always come out this easy. Sometimes you have to use a hammer with a little chisel to get up under there. But these will come up too pretty easy. You might want to save one if you're going to use one around some doorway openings, although you can't run it across the doorway opening. You can run on the sides for when you're putting carpet down later, so you might want to save a few of these strips. They're not in very hard. As you can see, I can kind of pry them up and pry them out. They're cut in strips, so these look to be about 1 foot long strips. Sometimes they'll be longer. So we'll take that and go ahead and remove all the carpet and the pad. The pad is stapled down. There's staples in here sometimes. So you might need, there's one down here. You might need to, yeah, there's a staple there. You might need a little pliers here. I just use a pliers to pull those staples straight out. Just yank them straight out. They come out pretty easy. So what I found is that a big crowbar works better than that little pry bar. Get up, off. I don't like to get them too long or they're hard to get rid of, so I just kind of crack them if they're kind of long, split them. Okay, I've got all the tack strips off. I got them all in put in this one bucket. This is about a 14 by 14 foot room with another 7 by 35 or 7 by 5 closet. Put them all in this bucket. Trash man's really gonna love that. I used a life vest, kids life vest, put my knee on while I was going around pulling all the staples out with my pliers. The subfloor, you know, they say you really should never nail to OSB, and I'm using 3/4 inch oak and spike nails through there. This says Advantech flooring, but it looks like OSB to me. But I've done it in my bedroom, which is much bigger, the master bedroom, than this room, and it's held up good over the last 9 years. I'm gonna put a parchment overlay supposed to help for moisture and break the contact with the subfloor. Now you're supposed to figure out your joists. I mean, I look at my nails. My nail pattern seems to be running this way, and you're supposed to nail your boards perpendicular, which kind of works out good for me because I've got 3 doorways. And I'm going to be butting into these 2 doorways, and that's easier for me to do than running long ways and try to fashion a piece that goes back in around the molding. So that works out. So I'm going to do perpendicular to the joist. You can again look at the nail pattern. Sometimes you can tell by where the nails are running. Now, some people do leveling compound. This one doesn't look too unlevel to me. Some people do the leveling compound first, being a really long level and measure. And some people measure off in a room like this, 14 by 14. I'm not even going to measure. I looked at the wall. I sighted it down the wall this way, and it looked pretty flat. I didn't see a lot of bow or cup in the wall. So I'm going to use some spacers and space it out. Now, a lot of people remove the baseboard, and then move it up. I did that in my master bedroom and then put the 1/4 round molding. But in this room, I'm going to save a lot of time by not removing it. If you were going to remove it, you'd take a razor or box cutter and go along the top of the caulk and peel back the baseboard and try to save the baseboard so you can reuse it When you take it off, use putty knives, shims. Use shims on the wall to keep putty knives and pry bars. But this time I'm just going to put quarter out. I'm going to leave a little expansion gap. It's not going to expand long ways. It's going to expand widthwise. I'm going to leave expansion gap, and then I'm cover it with some quarter round that I picked up. That's really about 1/2 inch wide. So I'll do about half that 1/2 inch for my spacer. So I make sure I cover the ends of the boards with the quarter round, but I'm leaving my baseboard in. That'll save a lot of time. So still preparing the room for the tile. There was some mortar that was sloping out down here, so I had to take a cold chisel and chisel that back. That took a while. Chisel it back a little at a time so that the boards can butt up. I'm going to be running my hardwood kind of in like this, and it sits a little low, so I might leave a gap and put a transition piece in there. We'll see. Actually, it's not too bad though. Now the next part is this casing around the door. It's got a very irregular profile, so if I just butt when I'm coming in here at a right angle, I'm going to be butting up against here. I would have to cut a really funny zigzag profile to fit up against it, and then even then it wouldn't leave it much room, even though the board's mainly expanding and contracting this way. Still, it wouldn't leave it any room, so I'm going to undercut it so I can slide the boards. At least I could just do a notch, you know, if I need to right here, a 90-degree notch, which is a lot easier than profiling this irregular profile and trying to transfer that and cut it out from the board. Certainly I could do it, but you know, it just doesn't make sense time-wise to go down and draw a pattern. You could slip a piece of paper under there, draw the pattern, lay it across your board, and take bandsaw or scroll saw or whatever. You know, scroll saw probably wouldn't make it through 3/4 inch hook, but bandsaw and then chisel down, file down to the point. I mean, that would just take way too much time. So I'm just going to turn this upside down. Now I'm using a Fein multi-master tool here, and you know, not everybody's got one of these, and it's nice because it can cut straight in like this. The disadvantage to the Japanese pole saw is that you get close to this edge over here where the baseboard is, and it's kind of hard to deal with. I might start it just to show my line. You can bend it down a little bit like that when you do that and push your finger on the top. Again, I've got one hand on the phone, so I can't really show you that. I should be doing this sideways. So you can kind of run it like that by pushing down and bending it up. But again, I'm going to use the Multi-Master, which comes in handy for other flooring things too. So this is a general starting point for me. Got my compressor, miter saw on the stand, shop vac, a little stool, and some tools we'll go through. So I put the red rosin paper just on one strip, the first strip. I don't put it all the way across the room because I got all the tools and everything and be ripping it up. And I want to be able to sweep easy and walk across it. When I get to the far end of the room, or halfway over, when I get closer to my tools, then I'll use the cardboard boxes from the hardwood to lay them on the finished floor and move them out of the way. So I'm just doing one row at a time with the rosin paper. You're supposed to overlap the rosin paper about 6 to 8 inches. There's a moisture barrier. I guess if you put it right on it, moisture might seep up the seam. Some of my paper works as a vapor barrier. Other people say it just helps you slide the boards. I don't know, but I think it's probably a good idea. I mean, if you're on a first floor, this is a second floor, first floor, and there's a wet, humid crawl space under your house right under that floor, then yeah, you probably want to buy special paper that's made for underlayment. It's going to be a lot more expensive. This stuff's pretty cheap. Got a 500-foot roll of this for pretty cheap. Anyway, my layout lines, some people start in the middle room, go toward both sides, but this is a small room, so I don't imagine, even if it's off a little bit, that it will be too bad by the time I get to the other end, too slanted. So what I did is I took my straightest part of this wall and I drew this Sharpie line using a straight board and extended it all the way down to the end. And then I measured off of one end all the way to the other end. It was 139 7/8 inches. And then I went to the other end and measured off the line, again about 4 or 5 inches out from the wall, and went all the way across, and it was 139 7/8. So it was exactly the same distance. Now you could measure the middle to the floor and then measure back from that too if you're doing a bigger room. I did find that my wall was a little more bowed than I thought, especially right down near this plug. There's probably some insulation or something pushing out. Even the baseboard bows out, but that's okay since I ran this straight line all the way across. I picked the straightest part of the wall, which is down at this end, and started my straight line there and then just extended it out and put some trowel boards to make sure it wasn't too far away from the wall. So now what I'm going to do, if you had a bigger room, you can run into a problem with wood expansion. You can expand, you know, if it's 20-foot room, I guess it could expand 3/4 of an inch or around that, which would run into your baseboard. So if you're in a bigger room, then what you do is you start in the middle and you get the long board here to nail down right in the middle of the floor. You're going to discard. Can't be 3/4 inch though, or you might hit the edge with your nailer. It's got to be like a 1/2 inch wide so your nailer can rest over the top of this. Then you nail in one side, and then when you're done, get rid of this board, go back down, cut you a spline on a table saw. Has to fit really tight, spline in here. Doesn't have to be real wide, but it has to be height-wise, has to be the right distance to fit in here tight. And then use this as a back. Once this rolls in and you've done all these rows, then you can start going the opposite direction. And that'll even out your right and left walls so you don't get too much angle by the time you get to the other wall. You don't want to have boards sticking out at an angle. So in past rooms that I've done, I've always started in the middle. This is a smaller room, 14 foot, and I don't think it's going to be too far off. It will be off by the time I get to the other side, but also I know that there's going to be a couch and a bookshelf and things that are being covered in that edge. But I measured it, it's right on within an 1/8 inch, so I'm good to go. Now my first boards along the wall, I actually used some trim screws here, and they have a real small head. It's kind of a star-shaped head, and I put one on each side, and then to hold the board down the middle so it's flat on the subfloor so it's not bowed up, and I put about every 6 inches these holes to put nails. Now what I'm using is I'm using a 8D 2.5 inch nail right here. 8D 2.5 inch nail. It's a pretty beefy nail, so it doesn't tend to bend when you're hammering in. You don't get a lot of bending out like you do with smaller diameter, smaller gauge nails. Now the screws I'm using for the first row are trim screws, 2 1/4 by 7, and then they have a very small head. I'm going to fill it in with this acrylic where the head of the screw, that hole I countersunk it. I used a small countersink, and I'll fill it in with wood filler. Now if you're taking the baseboard off with the 1/4 round, that'll cover those holes, the screw holes I put on either end of my starting boards. I've got one down here. You can see this one may be covered by the 1/4 round, I'm not sure, but by the time it's got acrylic in there, it'll be so close to the edge and it's back behind the bed that you won't be able to see it. So I just put one on each end of this long. So pick your longest boards that are straight. You know, look down the board, look at it and make sure it's straight by sighting down the board. See if it curves one way or the other. If it does, don't use it. And so I'm going to go ahead and nail the first couple rows because you can't fit the nailer in there. Once I get a couple rows out, then I'll be able to fit my nailer in there and start using the compressor.